Well, thank you everybody for joining today. My name is Scott Jensen. I am a senior manager here at Anglepoint, and I lead our Oracle practice. This is a team of global Oracle licensing experts, and we help our customers manage all things Oracle. That said, I haven't always worked in Oracle licensing. I actually first started my career at Anglepoint on our security team under my good friend and colleague Avinash. Avinash, it's a pleasure to present with you today. Do you want to take just a moment to introduce yourself?
Yeah, Scott, thanks a lot. Hi, everybody. This is Avinash here. I am Senior Director here at the Security and Compliance Practice here at Anglepoint. I have been in this industry for roughly give and take 15 to 16 years now. I have done IT asset management in the past as well. Obviously, but my focus has been IT security and GRC. My team is responsible for doing all work related to IT security, cybersecurity, GRC services globally. And I'm happy to present here with my good friend Scott and, explore this topic around, obviously security and ITAM and how they are integral to each other. So excited to present with you, Scott. Over to you, back to you.
Thanks, Avinash. That's right. So as you might have been able to tell, Avinash and I are a bit unique in that we both have a background in security and ITAM, which allows us to see the bridge by which these two teams are uniquely related. And so we now, of course, myself coming from the Oracle perspective, we want to use Oracle Java and the changes to Oracle Java licensing over the last couple of years as a use case for how and why security teams and ITAM teams should work together. So I want to start today by just talking about some of the changes to Java licensing. Anybody in the ITAM space today is probably well aware that back in 2019, at the start of 2019, Oracle changed their rules of Java. Historically, Java has been free to use in most use cases. There's always been some cases where a customer would need to purchase a Java license. There's what Oracle would consider commercial features that have always required a license. These are things like Java Mission Control and JRocket. And if customers needed support for Java, then they would need a Java license as well. But to be honest, I would say this probably only impacted maybe 10% of all organizations that utilize Java. But according to Oracle's 2019 announcement, all versions and releases of Java on or after April 16th, 2019 would require a Java SE subscription. So these are no longer perpetual licenses like you could historically purchase. This is a annual subscription that customers would need to purchase in order to have versions of Java 7, 8, and 11 released on or after April 16th, 2019, installed in their environments. I've included just here sort of a price list, and as you can see, Oracle, considers this sort of a volume discount, if you will. The more that you purchase, the cheaper that the respective subscriptions are. There's two subscriptions. There's the desktop subscription, which is licensed under the Named User Plus model, which means that if you have a user who has a desktop, a laptop, and a VDI, all three of which have a licensable version of Java installed, you still only need to license that user a single time. So something to factor for if you haven't already done your own Java assessment. Make sure that you're only counting users a single instance. And then the Java SE subscription is intended to license a customer's server environment. And this is utilizing Oracle's standard processor metric definition. And again, if you're familiar with Oracle licensing, you probably know that installing Oracle products a virtualized environment using this processor definition, Oracle's position is that you should license the entirety of your virtual environment. And so oftentimes for a lot of my customers, they begin to fall into the bottom tier of the subscription models where they're paying $12.50 per month for each processor license. But when you annualize this cost, it lands somewhere in the $3 to $5 million range per year that customers are now subject to for Oracle Java licensing. So this, of course, created sort of a big ripple throughout the industry. Two major ways that organizations were impacted by this change. One is, of course, that organizations just were not prepared for this. Nobody really anticipated Oracle to begin licensing something that for the previous decade and more has historically been free. But that said, while customers weren't really prepared, Oracle Sales was prepared to begin charging customers. So almost immediately after the April licensing change, a Java sales team was created, and they began reaching out to customers that they knew were using Java, and getting these customers to enter these large subscriptions without really giving them the time to properly assess if they even needed Java, or to assess any alternatives to Java. And then the second impact is a lot of customers just to even avoid conversations with the Java sales team, or to avoid penalties and the threat of an audit, they just entered subscriptions. Again, whether they needed it or not. We saw a number of customers in 2019 who just went out and purchased Java subscription ULAs, unlimited license agreements, and again, spending $3 to $5 million on licensing agreements that they may not even need in the first place if they just had the opportunity to assess Java within their environment. So this then brings us to, what options do Java users have? And we can kind of distill it into three options, right? One option is that users of Java could just stay on a version of Java which was released prior to April the 16th, 2019. So for Java version, 7 or 8, you might want to stay, we'll just use Java 8 as an example. You may want to stay on any update prior to 2.11. If it's prior to 2.11, then it's free to use. So that's one option. You could just stay on an old version of Java. The second option would be to remove or replace Java from your environments, and we've had many customers who've done this as well. They've assessed whether or not Java was needed, and they uninstalled it, or they moved to a free and open source solution such as OpenJDK or Amazon Corretto, or now Java 17, which is a free to use version of Java that we can discuss later. But then the third option becomes to purchase a Java subscription, right? If you can't remove or replace it, and you can't stay on an old version of Java, then you're going to have to purchase a Java subscription. And again, this could be, quite expensive. So a question now to our attendees, and I would welcome you to enter your answers in the chat, please. And that is, what do you, as ITAM or security practitioners, parties interested in the topic we're talking about today, what do you see as the risks associated with each of these three options? So I'll give you just a moment to enter your comments into the chat. What are some risks associated with any of these three options? Okay, so we've got a couple of responses so far. One is that there's going to be currency and vulnerabilities to hacking. Absolutely, right? So staying on an old version of Java has some inherent cybersecurity risks of doing so. The whole point, I should say the whole point, but one of the points of upgrades and new versions is that vulnerabilities are being patched. And so if you don't have access to those upgrades, you don't have access to those patches, then your environment could certainly be vulnerable. Another comment is that it's a large project to remove or replace Oracle Java with an environment, and that's absolutely correct. I've seen customers who have sponsored projects to do just that, to remove or replace Java, and it typically takes about a year of a well-managed product to remove Java from a very large enterprise. I've seen some customers do it in less amount of time. They're typically not, the largest of customers, but certainly it takes a long time. It's a big investment. And then yes, there's a few comments about cost, right? And that much of this cost is not typically budgeted for, right? So now all of a sudden, customers are being required to pay, whether it be $100,000 or $3 million or $5 million. With purchasing a Java subscription, you run the risk of perhaps over purchasing, right? You say, well, let's just license the entire enterprise because it's too difficult for us to really assess whether or not we need Java and where it's deployed. So I'd say that's certainly a risk as well. So thank you all for your comments. Avinash?
Scott, yeah, I had a point in question for you, right? So what are you seeing in the industry, right? Java obviously is an integral part of so much software, right? Like, it comes free with that all of the time over so many years, right? And what are you seeing in the industry where, for Java, which you never paid, came as free as a part of other software? How are you seeing organizations tackling that now as a part of this change in licensing? Because if I'm not correct, and again, I'm not an SME here, but whatever you got free as a part of the software also now, in some sense, the organization have to start looking at that and see how to license that. Is that true, or is that probably not true?
Yeah, so I would say of the previous of the three options that we present here, I'm seeing a variety of all three of them being deployed, and it all is dependent on the organization. I've seen customers who virtually uninstalled Java overnight, and their viewpoint was, well, we'll uninstall it, and then if something breaks, we'll reinstall it. And they treat Java as if it were a virus. If Java pops up in their environment, they uninstall it immediately, and then they go back to the user or the installer for them to justify their need for Java. So I've seen that sort of extreme, but then I've seen a lot of customers who try to find a hybrid model where they assess specifically where they need Oracle Java, where they need to have those upgrades and patches most immediately, but then anywhere else, they're moving to like a free and open source solution such as OpenJDK. A lot of customers are putting OpenJDK on all of their desktops while keeping Oracle Java on their servers, right? Since their servers are what's really hosting most of their infrastructure, or all of their infrastructure for that matter. So I would say it's a wide array, and I wish I could pin down what the exact pattern is, but it really comes down to each organization. And that's something that, as part of our services, that's something that we try to help our customers assess is what are their options, what is their license need, and what's their path forward.
Got you. All right.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Avinash. So, all right, so of course, as you can imagine, right, we just talked about some of the risks associated with these three options. We're of course going to spend the point of this presentation is really to focus in on this first one, right? So we have organizations who are saying, well, let's just stay on an old version of Java. And I'm not joking. I've had several, CTOs, CIOs, very senior leadership who have said that that's the path forward for them. Just don't upgrade Java, stay on an old version, and then, where possible, try to move off of Oracle Java. And so, something that I've witnessed as somebody who has a background in security, but who largely works in the ITAM space today, I see that if we're looking at how the scales are balanced between cybersecurity and IT asset management, there are a number of organizations that I've witnessed that seemed very concerned with their IT savings opportunities without considering their cybersecurity risks. A lot of organizations are saying, you know, how do I reduce my software spend? How do I reduce my hardware spend? You know, there's certainly a big move to the cloud right now as a way to reduce costs. There's sort of a hyper focus on this, and that's just in some organizations. I'm not saying it's unique to all, but I'm sure if you're in the ITAM space today, you might be thinking, well, that doesn't seem very representative of my organization. If anything, it's the other way around. And that is that my organization seems hyper-focused on security without a lot of regard to the benefits of IT asset management. I don't know, Avinash, if you can speak to this or if you witnessed the same
Yes.
from your point of view.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Scott. I mean, we on the security team work with a lot of our clients who obviously, consider security at a very high risk. Of course, right? You have to spend a lot of focus on that, dollars on that. But really, right, the advantages of having a very matured ITAM program, or at least if not a very mature, but in that journey, really, will, I guess, help a lot of those advantages to trickle into the security side as well, because a lot of things we see on the security side do need a lot of similar work, which the ITAM team does and should do, of course, as a part of their business. And we want to see, we're trying to really educate our customers on that front quite a lot, right? A mature ITAM program will help you not only grow that side, but also help them in security business as well. I mean, we just put some statistics up there where a data breach report was kind of said by IBM and the 21 Institute, which kind of reflects what the data breach has been costing in general the industry in 2021, right? I mean, obviously we know that COVID was still up in the air, right? COVID was going on, people are all remote working, so remote work, we know, was a big factor into a lot of these cybersecurity attacks, ransomware attacks happening, right? Everybody was working in the offices. We thought we are behind the firewalls, we're secure enough, but COVID hit and everybody had to move home, and then companies were struggling to kind of make sure that the cybersecurity posture is correct. But unfortunately, right, we know cybersecurity takes some time to get mature. If you're not focused on that, then we saw a lot of increased costs associated with that, and of course later data breach is also happening, right? Then data breach happens, which is obviously one element and one headache, but also it costs a lot of business to the customers, to the clients. We all know that organizations obviously have a public facing entities and other things. They lose a lot of their business because customers don't want to work with them, or they try to take business somewhere else. So those costs are, as you said, it says about 38% of the cost. So again, taking Java just as a use case, this could be very well, kind of taken to a next level and see if this is not managed properly, right? Log4j, we all know Log4j happened last year in 2021, and the resulting out of that, we all know it was just an attack where somebody exploited and got into the Java libraries for this Log4j, and it was so much available, widespread everywhere. So everybody was scrambling, everybody was running around and trying to figure out whether we really are using this or not using this. And if obviously an organization was well in sync with their security teams, or security teams was well in sync with ITAM, with both vice versa, we believe organizations would have saved a lot of time, energy to probably save the cost associated with not only just finding out, but also making sure if there was anything going on, then they could have trimmed the cost down or trimmed the effects of that as well. So we've seen in the past similar things like SolarWinds has happened. We've seen the example of the Apache struts happening in about 3-4 years back as well. And again, right, these are all examples where it clearly indicates that the availability of ITAM team working with security team just really will help each other to make sure the data is available straight away for us, right? Yeah, security and ITAM are not competitive, right? I guess that's the key point here, right? whenever we go into security meetings, or we're trying to understand, what is the ITAM posture of a particular company, we unfortunately see that ITAM has less role to play in the security space. Again, I'm not saying that we've not seen that happening, but the maturity level in terms of interactions of the two organizations, whether it's ITAM and security, is not been a lot. And we like to see that happening, where for example, if security team wants to get an information about a certain applications or certain endpoints running, then IT team or the ITAM team has that really available to them, and that can be easily then translated into a documentation which can be used for running some of these checks on different issues going on. So yeah, I mean, it's an area which we definitely want ITAM and security to work more together. Scott, what have you seen?
Yep.
As a part of ITAM, have you been in the security industry? At what levels are you seeing these teams talking together to each other, really?
Yeah, and so that's a fantastic question, and I would say not enough, right? which is part of the reason that we felt like a presentation like this is necessary, is because again, I'm seeing teams who are making decisions about the future of their Oracle software without seemingly any consulting or collaboration with their security team, right? So when somebody makes the decision to stay on an old version of Java, my response as their consultant with a security background is, have you checked with your security team to make sure they're okay with this particular idea? And so I certainly am aware that some organizations have mastered this. Some organizations are very good at making sure that key ITAM representatives and security representatives are sitting on some of the same committees and councils within their organization. But in others, it seems like there's a major disconnect, to the extent where sometimes I find that security teams are almost roadblocking the ITAM efforts. And I think of examples where we have new ITAM organizations being established within their organizations, and they want to onboard ITAM tools which allow them to get a high level of inventory of the software and hardware deployed within their environments. And I've seen security teams who will not approve of these kinds of ITAM tools within their environments, right? So you've got one team that's trying to get better coverage and an understanding of what's deployed and what's being used. And then I see security teams who say, nope, we don't approve of that particular agent being installed on our device. And so then we run into a situation where ITAM and security are sort of competitive, and there's some conflict there.
Mm-hmm.
And so my goal oftentimes when this happens is to try to bring all of the right people to the table to address those concerns, to make and to help illustrate to the security teams how and why this ITAM data will be so valuable to them.
Right. Yep. And again, right, what we have seen from the security side, as you said, right, if it's in some organizations where they're under the same umbrella, maybe like the CTO or the CIO's umbrella, there has been, maybe discussions going on, or, the teams talk to each other, right? They're not in complete silos, but, in some cases, organizations, ITAM probably is a part of a different team, maybe sometimes legal or sometimes procurement or sometimes finance, right? And they do not have much interaction with the CIO side of the house or the security space of the house. And that's where an example where you gave, a new tool comes in, the security probably is not involved in it. It gets approved by a business for a certain reason. And then, security kind of obviously shoots it down because it doesn't help, or they do not know that they have to review this first. And, there's obviously time lost between the translation between the two teams, really. So again, great examples of why the ITAM and the security team should probably talk more often, regularly, even if they're not, part of the same umbrella.
That's exactly right. So we've come up with just 3 simple ways that we feel like ITAM and security teams should be working together. And so the first one is regarding governance. We feel that ITAM and security teams should be working together to create policies and to write procedures for how IT assets are used within their environments. Again, the ITAM teams have a lot of data to understand how different software and hardware and IT assets are being used throughout the organization. But then sometimes we'll see security teams who create a policy without understanding the needs of IT consumers on their network. They'll write these policies and they'll say XYZ, technology is not allowed in the environment, without understanding that that technology is already has widespread use throughout the environment and may actually have a business need. And so, again, that's sort of an overly simplified example, but this kind of thing happens, and it can be prevented if ITAM and security teams were both tasked with writing policies and procedures from a governance standpoint.
Yeah, well said, Scott. Again, a very clear example of we know there are so many frameworks and there's so many guidelines coming across the globe, which talks about really what kind of assets are being used in what capacity, and who is using that from a standpoint of business or in any other reason, really. So I think it's absolutely important to clearly lay out what asset is being used where, and that policy is about that, what is allowed and what is not allowed. I think often case the ITAM team is probably unaware of certain security team doing something which from an ITAM perspective, it's either they are not aware of it, which obviously is not helpful because the ITAM team is tasked to understand that from an asset perspective, or sometimes it's just that the ITAM team really has the data. So again, doing a rework of a similar thing is obviously going to waste everybody's time. I think that is a key point where if you're writing a policy and a procedure about how the use case should be, then the teams should be talking to each other, really.
Yeah, exactly right. The second one is regarding a company's attack surface. Avinash, do you want to maybe explain what an attack surface is in the terms of the cybersecurity world?
Yeah, exactly, right. So in plain simple language, right, the more number of entry points which exist in an organization, the bigger the attack surface, right? It could be your application, it could be your hardware, it could be any of your software, or it could be any of your cloud environment. More number of those in your environment, you have much more broader interface to work with, to secure it, and to make sure that people are not looking to penetrate and get into an organization, really. So attack surface, the lesser it is, as it says, you have a lesser smaller surface attack and lesser things to worry about. And an example I would probably mention to you that we often see in the security world, and again, this is why even an example of ITAM and security have to work very closely, is there are repeated same software for the same use cases, different software for the same use cases in an environment or an organization, right? You probably do not want that to happen, right? If you want to try to, obviously we understand there are some use cases in some organizations which are huge globally, but most of the time you won't have a single software with the same use case for the entire organizations, so that you do not have to worry about patching, upgrading, managing the different software for the same use cases, really. So again, a simple example of keeping the smaller inventory or helps you to keep a smaller attack interface, and that way you can manage things better, really.
Yeah, from the Oracle perspective, I think of cases where oftentimes we're looking at things through a licensing lens, and and so we're helping customers understand where do they have Oracle products deployed, what is their compliance position per the licenses that they already own. And oftentimes when an organization is out of compliance from a licensing perspective, one of the ways to remediate any financial risk is by uninstalling Oracle applications or decommissioning devices that are no longer needed. And this happens with probably every customer I have, where they will decommission servers based on our assessment, because they say, oh yeah, we haven't used that device in a long time, or that VM was spun up for some test purposes. It's been running for 2 years, but nobody's ever touched it. Well, from that is the ITAM practitioner's role, is to identify these use cases and to decrease inventory that is not necessary. And so when we do so, when we decrease inventory, then we are also reducing our attack surface as well. So here again, we can just illustrate how, you know, the ITAM practitioner's objective is completely in line with somebody whose role is in the cybersecurity space. I really like this quote, the quote at the bottom of the screen here that talks, you know, from Sun Tzu, classic art of war quote, which is, in any battle, there's going to be both direct and indirect methods. And so in all fighting, the direct method may be used for joining battle, but indirect methods will be needed in order to secure victory, right? And so if the cybersecurity team is seen as your traditional method, your direct method for joining battle, in these cybersecurity wars, if you will, for protecting an organization's you know, assets and intellectual property, then perhaps ITAM could be viewed as the indirect method that's really going to be needed to secure victory. All right, and then that brings us to our third point, which is around audit and audit readiness. Everybody loves audits, right? I'm guessing if you're on this call, you've probably been involved either in a security audit or a software related audit, excuse me. So, you know, the point that we're making here is, you know, when I was working, you know, with Avinash, a lot of the work we did was in governance around the various security frameworks that are in place, ISO 27001, HIPAA, GDPR, et cetera, right? Well, you know, now that I'm on the Oracle side of things, I'm helping customers navigate and prepare for, or hopefully prevent, Oracle audits. And most of the major software publishers do have audit programs as well. And so the idea here is, you know, maybe these organizations should be working together. I don't know, Avinash, if you have some ideas on, you know, what that looks like for ITAM and security teams to be engaged or partnering in their audit readiness programs.
Yeah. I mean, again, to just echo your thought there, right? I mean, on the security side, whenever we are, you know, doing a review of, you know, any of these frameworks, or in the GRC space, trying to work, you know, with some of the vendor compliance initiatives, other things, you know, on and off things which come up, you know, like, okay, you know, we need to make sure that, you know, there's an asset inventory. We need to make sure there is all the, you know, unauthorized software, you know, the shadow assets are tracked. You know, they want to make sure that everything is, you know, patched properly in the right fashion. There's a process behind that and how that's being managed. You know, there is a proper flow diagram, right? I mean, flow diagrams is needed for every team. So the security team or the ITAM team, right? You know, data is flowing from which direction, where, and other things, which is also important, by the way, now from a privacy perspective, right? I mean, we all know privacy is so key now in this modern world of, you know, data mapping and in data collection, where, you know, it is important to know which of your software is having what kind of data, so that you can track it back, delete it, or, you know, manage it for personal reasons and other things as well. So, you know, again, just echoing thought, right? You know, this all obviously from a ITAM and a security perspective are so much done from an audit perspective in a day-to-day world, that, you know, these teams obviously should work and have to work closely, right? From my perspective, whenever we are doing some of these security and GRC work, we are always looking to engage the teams which manage this whole asset process, asset onboarding, asset offboarding process, asset tracking process completely, because you know, they are the key for us from a security perspective to, you know, give us the data, make sure that, you know, we are able to demonstrate from a framework perspective that, you know, there is a process in place, you know, it's being done accurately, done correctly. And you know, the security team, of course, right, has to you know, be a part of that. But, you know, there's a lot of data available with the ITAM team, whether it's Oracle, you know, products, IBM products, Microsoft, or given anything. And then just making sure, these teams exchange the data and don't have to do the rework again, right? Again, making sure that you have these touch points. If you talk weekly, bi-weekly, great, at least monthly, so that you know what is coming up on the horizon from the security and a ITAM perspective, and can coordinate more closely instead of reading anything really.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, I was just going to say, again, from the Oracle perspective, when we're helping customers try to identify, let's say how many users are assigned to an application, for example. We're doing this from a licensing perspective to make sure that the customer has enough licenses. But from any of the security frameworks you see on the screen, those users are managed from a different perspective, which is to make sure that the right users are authorized to use or have access to, say, for example, financial data of an organization. And so oftentimes a request for users, a list of users, goes through the same individual within an organization. And so between the various security audits and the various software audits that may be going on at a single time, this user might be getting several requests a month or a quarter or a year for data that they've provided several times already. And naturally that leads to frustration on the end user part or the product owner side of things. And of course, that's something we would want to avoid, and it can be avoided if the security teams and ITAM teams are collaborating on the types of data that have to be requested to maintain compliance, whether it be for a security framework or an ITAM or a software audit. Just managing that, entering that request into their GRC tools such that data is only being requested as necessary, and we're not alienating, users in the organization.
Yeah, I just want to kind of highlight a very a point example over here. As a part of a security review with one of the organizations, we were obviously trying to do a security analysis work and help similar kind of say if anybody on the audit, anybody on the team call in probably knows about SOX audits, right? SOX audits are pretty heavy intensive in terms of access, especially trying to understand what are the segregation of duties and so on and so forth for every user, depending on what type of license it is. And a point, an example, right? This is also needed from an Oracle licensing perspective or a civil license perspective, which Scott just mentioned. And I think we were at this particular client, and we were going through this particular review on the security side, and ITAM team actually had all these data already available, which was again, because access reviews generally happen in a big organizations probably every quarter, and that was very timely for that information to be shared between the teams, and that our review was done pretty quickly. I think, again, a point, an example of how the specific data can be shared between the two teams, really.
Yeah, it's a fantastic example. All right, so that sort of brings us to just a summary of this presentation, which is to say that Java is just one of many use cases that can demonstrate why security teams and ITAM teams should be collaborating in the various decisions of an IT organization that have a widespread impact. These two teams should not be competitive. Security is integral to ITAM, and ITAM is integral to security. And if they're not within your organization, they should be. Hopefully you'll be able to work with the appropriate individuals to gain this sponsorship and this collaboration, such that there is an appropriate balance between security and ITAM. And then the three ways that we've sort of illustrated that these teams can work together is related to governance, to risk management, which was in regards to reducing the attack surface of an organization, and then audit readiness. You might also summarize that as just saying GRC, right? Governance, risk, and compliance really is the way that these two teams overlap. So with that said, we are happy to use the remainder time that we have today to answer any questions that our audience has for us. Feel free to use the Q&A feature that we have built in here to Zoom to enter your questions. Braden, will you, I suppose, moderate that for us and let us know any questions that have come in? But we're happy to talk about Java, if that's what you want to talk about. If you want to spend some more time doing a deep dive into just the Java piece of what we talked about today, more than happy to address that. If you have security related questions or just something related to the overlap between the two, we're more than happy to use the remaining time to address that.
Great, thank you. Yeah, we have one question here that hopefully the two of you can help answer. It is, are there any examples or what, like specific types of data can the asset management teams be sharing with the security team?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, and Avinash, feel free to chime in too. The first thing that I readily think of is inventory data, right? And if we look at the case of Log4j, for example, naturally the security team is going to have a vested interest in identifying anywhere Log4j is installed, so that such that it can be either removed or properly patched or addressed, however it may be, right? Well, if the ITAM team has the right tooling in place, chances are they could download a report within minutes that shows all locations where Log4j was installed, and then pass that over to the security team to address it. So that's one piece of data that readily comes to my mind.
Yeah, no, Scott, that's a great point for sure. Just to add on to that, right? I think some of the other things which, and I think I earlier gave an example about how data related to segregation of duties, right? I mean, between ITAM and security teams is something which they can easily share, right? It's both the teams will need the data for various purposes, and that can be used pretty easily as well. But the other which comes to my mind with again talking so much about security and privacy, a big piece of GRC nowadays. Asset data, the asset inventory carries a lot of rich information as to what type of software or hardware is there, and who owns that, what kind of information is running on them probably, and what kind of data is stored there, and all those things, right? We've seen ITAM leaders tracking that data, which is again very important and needed from a security perspective, just to know what is residing where, but also from a privacy perspective, just if you do things like an impact assessment on some of your software and hardware, it's key to know what kind of data is being tracked in which application or which software, really. So ITAM teams generally have that information. We've seen that in some of the mature programs tracking that. So we should definitely exchange that information also, if in case that's available, really.
Excellent. Another question we have is, what are your thoughts about Java 17 and NFTC from a security point of view? NFTC, for anybody who's not familiar, is the what's called the Oracle no-fee terms and condition license, which is effectively what allows Java 17 to be free. So I alluded to this at the beginning of the presentation, which was that Oracle announced in 2019 this change to Oracle licensing, and it seemed like going forward, all Java was going to be licensable. Well, in September of 2021, so just last year, Oracle sort of surprised everybody again by saying that beginning with Java 17, all long-term releases of Java would be free to use for up to 1 year after the next long-term release is released. So in the case of Java 17, it's believed that you'll be able to use Java 17 for about 3 years, because every 2 years Oracle is going to issue a new long-term release of Java. So we believe that the next long-term release will be Java 21, which means that customers would be able to use Java 17 for 1 year after Java 21 is released. So this is great, right, for a lot of organizations, but there are some natural risks that you have to be aware of, right? One is if you upgrade to Java 17, and this assumes, of course, that you've tested it to make sure that it doesn't have any negative impact on your production devices and other applications, right? So let's say you've done that whole process and you decide you can move to Java 17. Well, you also have to be able to upgrade it to Java 21. And if you cannot do that by the time the 1 year is up, then you're back to needing a Java subscription again anyways, right? So do be aware that if you stick with Java 17 or if you stick with Oracle Java, you could be subject to these fees again if you're not on the path to upgrade. From a security point of view, though, one of the advantages of Oracle Java, and this is truly a real advantage, is that Oracle will release updates and patches as necessary, right? Whereas the free and open source solutions such as OpenJDK or Amazon Corretto only release on a quarterly or twice annual cadence. OpenJDK only releases updates every 6 months. Amazon Corretto is every quarter, I believe. There are others out there as well. But effectively, if you have a vulnerability with OpenJDK, you may have to wait until the next 6-month update before you can patch it. Well, with Oracle Java, part of what you're paying for is the fact that Oracle will work to issue an update as soon as possible. You'll have access to that update, and you can install it. So, from a security standpoint, there's an argument to make that staying on Oracle Java is one of the best things you can do, and paying for the subscription if needed to have access to that. But that said, it really depends on the risk tolerance level of a given organization. I have customers that are, in the financial sector that are maintaining, major financial infrastructure for the United States, and they moved to OpenJDK in about a year, almost 100% across the board. They felt like there wasn't a big enough security concern to stay on Oracle Java. That was their assessment. I've had other customers who've said, no way are we moving to a free and open source solution. We have to stick with Oracle because of the security aspect of it. So that's what we're going to do. And that's why I say it really just depends on each organization. All right, another question is, if you continually receive emails from Java/Oracle with the subject Java notice, license and security requirements, should you respond to the email and involve your security team? So that's a really good question. I don't know that I've personally ever seen one of these emails. Feel free, after this call today, if you wanted to shoot, forward one to me, and I'd, be happy to sort of give you my insight on that. So without knowing really what the content of this is, it's not surprising to me that you would be getting these kind of notices. But along that sort of vein, the Java sales team is very aggressive. They will be reaching out to your organization if they haven't already, and they'll do it to the extent of saying, listen, we can see that you're downloading Java, right? When a user within your environment downloads Java from the portal, they enter their email address, and Oracle will absolutely use the domain name as part of your email address to tie that back to your organization. And the sales reps will contact you and say, we see that you've downloaded Java 100 times in the last 3 months. We need to talk so we can assess your Java usage and figure out what you need to purchase, right? Now, of course, again, from a contractual standpoint, yes, every organization is now subject to these licensing terms, and they should be making purchases if they are using Java in their environment. That said, it's not just as simple as assessing, whether or not you have licensable Java. If you're an Oracle customer in other regards, chances are much of your Oracle Java usage is included with your other Oracle licenses and deployments. And so that has to be assessed. There's a lot of third-party applications that might be in your environment where the third party is also providing the Java license. An example of that would be WebEx, Cisco's WebEx. They they actually entered into an agreement with Oracle where they provide the third-party agreement. So all of that has to be assessed. But unfortunately, without the specifics of the notice that you received, since it does seem to have a security requirements aspect to it, I'd say absolutely make sure your security team is aware of it as well.
Yeah, I mean, just to add to that, Scott, and again, right, again, without seeing the actual content of the email, we really can't comment much, but what we have also heard, right, kind of giving these emails and trying to say, you know, we're going to help you with the security, and that kind of a cause to run an audit, right? I mean, there are third parties which are being collecting this data and maybe handing over to some of these leaders in the Oracle space, other space, and that again will kind of trigger an audit for you guys, saying that hey, there is we see these things, and you need to make sure you pay up or whatever it is. So I think obviously you got to be very careful, and yeah, I mean obviously, right, if something definitely doesn't look right, involve this right folks from security team as well as the other individuals, really.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, exactly. Thanks, Avinash. So couple more questions. I sort of alluded to the challenges. One question is related to the challenges of Java that's embedded with other applications. And so I like that you call it a challenge, because it is really a challenge to assess that. Like I said, some of your third-party agreements would include Java and effectively what we do, just to give some additional insight, is when we assess a customer's environment for them, we actually request a list of all applications in their environment on those devices where Java is installed. And we've actually built a repository over the last 3 years of all known applications that require Java. And so we take your list of applications and we pair it against our repository, and we try to quickly identify those that require Java, whether or not the software publisher, the third-party publisher, provides the license or not, and whether or not the licensing onus would be on your organization. And so, of course, we found a faster way to do it, but if you were to do this yourself, that's effectively the process you have to undergo, is by taking each application and doing research to see whether or not it needs it. Of course, this should be done in collaboration with your sysadmins. Before Java gets removed or uninstalled widespread, there should always be a test and QA process to make sure that there's not any widespread implications of doing so. So are you aware if Oracle has been keen to audit organizations during this health situation? So Oracle has certainly maintained their audit program. If you mean health situation being the global pandemic, then I would say absolutely yes. Oracle has continued with their audit program. In relations to auditing Java specifically, they did begin to audit Java in December of 2021, so just about 6 months ago. It was like Christmas Eve, basically, when Oracle sent Java notices to several customers in North America. I have firsthand knowledge of this because one of them was an existing client of ours at the time, and still is an existing client. And so we've been helping them navigate that Java audit. I presented a couple of weeks ago at another conference, and there were other organizations there that confirmed that they too have received official Java audit notices. I wrote a blog article about this in February, and there's a podcast on the same topic. If you just Google, angle point Oracle Java audits, then you'll get a couple of results for our blog article and our podcast where we discuss this in a little bit more detail. But yes, they are auditing for Java. Can you provide a list of all non-Oracle applications that come with Java as part of their licensing? I cannot provide that list. We do consider that proprietary information at this point and part of our value add for the services we provide. But it is something where if engaged with us, right, in a Java assessment, we would be utilizing that information to sort of expedite the analysis process for Java. All right, I think that covers the questions for today. I just want to take a moment to thank everybody for attending. We really appreciate it. Of course, we both Avinash and I have included our contact information on the screen. Feel free to get in touch with us directly. And Braden, I'm sure you'll probably send something out afterwards as well, where if somebody wanted to contact us, they could do so. But we really appreciate your attendance today, and we hope that this was of value to you. And we hope that you'll be able to get your security and ITAM teams working as closely as possible going forward.
Yeah, same here. I want to thank everybody, and it's great that we could spend some time with here talking about how we can work these teams together. Thanks a lot, and we hope everybody could take back some valuable information from this session here.